Let me dive right into this topic of a complaint-free world, right? Let's start with how it happened. I am from the Center for Spiritual Living in San Jose. Our senior minister is Dr. David Bruner, and we actually took on a complaint-free world, I want to say back in 2010, I think it was. And we decided this year to bring it back. And in the month of July, we actually dedicated 4 Sundays to it. And then we did a 4-week workshop series, which I will condense this afternoon. But it's based on the book by Will Bowen, who is a Christ Church Unity pastor, I believe in Kansas City. And one of my favorite things that I read right off the bat that kind of hooked me was he told a story about 2 construction workers. And you might have heard it, but it's an old story. And there are these 2 workers, and they sit down to eat lunch together. And one of them opens his box and immediately complains, "Oh, meatloaf, a meatloaf sandwich. I hate meatloaf sandwiches." And his friend doesn't say anything. And then the following day, the 2 of them meet up again for lunch. And again, the first worker opens his lunchbox and looks inside. And this time he's even more agitated. And he says, "Another meatloaf sandwich?" And as before, his colleague, his coworker, remains silent. And the third day, the 2 of them are preparing to eat lunch when the first construction worker opens his lunchbox and he begins to shout, "I have had it. I am so tired of meatloaf. Day in and day out, the same thing. Meatloaf sandwiches every blessed day. I want something else." And so his coworker just wanted to be helpful, right? So he said to him, "Well, why don't you ask your wife to make you a different sandwich?" And with bewilderment on his face, the first worker looks at him and says, "What are you talking about? I make my own lunch." And it was such an awakening, right? I think 2 things that almost everyone can agree upon is that there is far too much complaining in the world. And I'm a pretty optimistic person, actually. There aren't too many things that I don't like. Mornings, oh, the irony, and hot weather. Those 2 things might be my kryptonite, right? So last week was not so much fun. But there is a lot of complaining in the world, and the other thing that we might be able to agree upon is that, let's just say the state of our world is not necessarily the way we would want it to be. You know, there is a lot of combativeness, you know, a lot of division. And it could be very directly related to complaining, right? Or we may think, well, there is a lot to complain about right now. But how does that further a world that works for everyone, right? How does that further our global vision? How does that further the principles upon which we stand, upon which we were founded? And then there is a question that we pose to our community. Imagine what your life would be like without the air pollution, right, of the constant complaints. Imagine, you know, it almost conjures up a mixture of intrepidation and excitement, right? Like, well, I don't really complain that much, or so I thought, until I took the challenge. So let me tell you what the complaint-free challenge is. It takes 21 days for a hen's egg to hatch. And it also takes, coincidentally, about 21 days for a person to create a new behavior, right? For it to become a habit, to take root. So the complaint-free challenge begins with a bracelet. Right? A very simple, one of these bands. You've seen them everywhere in various colors. And you wear the bracelet, you pick whatever arm you choose that you want to wear it on. And when you find yourself complaining, you simply take it off. If a complaint happens to escape your mouth, or gossiping or criticizing, and you switch it to the other wrist. And so begins day one again, because the goal is to go 21 days without complaining. And then when you complain, you switch it back again. I have a little quirk. I don't like anything on my left wrist except my watch. So if I catch myself complaining and I switch it to this arm, I immediately say, I hate wearing it on that arm. And then I get to switch it again. I make up a complaint so I can move it again. The other thing is, if you suppose you undertake the challenge with a friend or a loved one or family or your community, if you hear someone who is wearing the band make a complaint, it's okay to point out to them, oh, you need to switch your band. But here's what happens. You have to switch yours then, because you were complaining about their complaining. So you have to change yours too. Sometimes it's so worth it. Sometimes I catch myself and I go like this. I take this off right now because let me tell you what I'm going to say. And the other thing to note is to really stay with it, because it really does take months sometimes. Will Bowen said it could take anywhere from 4 to 8 months to actually hit 21 consecutive days without complaining. It is a heck of a challenge. It really is. And the other thing, you want to know what the free pass is? This is awesome. We're talking only about criticism, complaining, and gossip that is spoken or typed, by the way. That's not a free pass. Texting is not a free pass. Facebook is not a free pass. If it comes out of your mouth, then you have to move your bracelet. Or if it comes out of your fingers, you have to move and start over at day one. But if you think it and you don't express it, it's free. You can holler in your mind all you want. You can complain in your mind. But you'll find out that even complaining thoughts will eventually begin to disappear. It's like magic. And if you lose it, by the way, or if it finally breaks under the pressure, as mine has done, don't worry about it. You can use anything. You could use like a rubber band, you know, the kind that they put around your broccoli in the supermarket. You can use that. It works. I'm so surprised, first of all, because Will Bowen is a Christ Church minister, as I said, but you would really think that he was a student of Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes said, how many of you have heard thoughts are things? Right? If you've been hanging around here more than a month, we've all heard thoughts are things, Where thought goes, energy follows, right? So it's important to focus on what we want rather than we don't want, right? Because like attracts like. And your thoughts have power, your words have power. And when we take on this thing of not complaining, it helps us put our attention on what we do want, as opposed to the opposite. Ernest Holmes also said that any thought which tends to inspire, to comfort, and to give peace to the mind is good, right? I would agree, yes? So complaining obviously focuses on what we don't want. We keep bringing it up. It's about what's wrong, and what we focus our attention on expands. Will Bowen gave a definition in here in his book. This was our book of the month, by the way. I know you're doing the Book of Blessings. I just ordered that. It came yesterday because I was intrigued. But Will Bowen said, complaining is talking about things you do not want rather than what you do want. When we complain, we're using our words to focus on things that are not as we would like. Our thoughts create our lives, and our words indicate what we are thinking. Let me repeat that, because if you get nothing else from today or from the book, let this be it. Our thoughts create our lives, and our words indicate what we are thinking. right? That's really powerful. There were so many others who said the same thing, great teachers. This is not a new idea, right? Definitely not a new idea. It seems to be reaching a critical mass, right, in our universal understanding. But thousands of philosophers, our brother Jesus said, as thou hast believed, so it be done unto thee. Marcus Aurelius said, the universe is change. Our life is what thoughts make it. Buddha said, we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. Norman Vincent Peale said, change your thoughts and you change the world. James Allen said, you are today what your thoughts have brought to you, and you will be tomorrow where your thoughts take you, right? So that's, the teachers, the universal teachers, have used this principle. So the process of actually moving the bracelet, it is a physical thing. It is a physical reminder, a tangible thing. When we move the bracelet, it helps realize where we are on the continuum of positive and negative expression. Moving the bracelet helps you notice your thoughts. It keeps you on track. It sounds simple, but when you notice your thoughts, you can ultimately reshape your life, right, into the direction that you want it to go or what you would rather it be. And into what you choose, right, because we're all free. We all have choice, right? When you decide to take up the challenge, it means that you have answered your soul's call to stop being part of the problem, right, and instead to become part of the solution. I love the title of chapter 1 in the book. It says, I complain, therefore I am. And Webster, I mean, he had his different definition, but Webster says the same thing. To complain is to express grief, pain, or discontent. So in the book, and we'll dive a little bit more in the workshop if you have time to stay, there are 4 stages to this whole process. To become competent, actually, to become competent at anything, we go through 4 stages. There's unconscious incompetence. That's the first stage. The second stage is conscious incompetence. And then the third stage is conscious competence. And the fourth stage is unconscious competence. Right now, right, we're in the unconscious incompetence stage, right? We may be unconscious about how much do we complain. You know, we may be sitting there going, well, I don't think I complain that much. Can you all remember the last time you complained to somebody? Years ago. Maybe for some of you it was when it was 190 degrees. And still others of you may have been born on the sun, and that doesn't bother you. I keep the weather for Ireland on my phone all the time, and every day I swipe the weather, and I go, oh, look, it's 60 degrees and raining in Dublin. And that's my way of not complaining. I just look at the weather somewhere else. That's my loophole. It's not saying that it's bad here. And you know, I really am my own gauge about this, right? There's a difference. Let me take this off here so I don't feel trapped. I know the difference. I know the difference when I open my front door and I say, oh, for God's sakes, right? I've been inside all day, so I wasn't really quite aware that it was warm out, but then I touched the doorknob and I almost burned my hand, right? Clearly, I know. The other difference is when I open the door and I simply say, oh, it's hot. That's different. I'm stating a fact. I'm stating a fact. So part of it is holding ourselves to our own accountability. You know. We all know the difference when something is simply, you know, no, I'm just reporting on something, or when it's right? And we all know that there are people who move through the world, and they are an ouch. They're an ouch looking for a trigger, right? They're in that unconscious incompetence phase. I'm sorry, I keep going back to Will because he says it better than I can. He said, in unconscious incompetence, you actually are pure potential, so there's good news, right? You're ready to create great things for yourself. There are exciting new vistas about to be explored, and all you have to do is be willing to go through the remaining steps. Many people are an ouch looking for a hurt. If you cry ouch, the hurt will show up. If you complain, you'll receive more to complain about. It's the law of attraction in action. Doesn't it sound like Ernest Holmes? It's amazing. As you complete these stages, as you leave complaining behind, as you are no longer an ouch looking for a hurt, your life will unfold for you like a beautiful spring flower. So one of the things that Will encourages you to do is to make a goal. The goal that I have set for myself is to be 21 consecutive days complaint-free by January 1, 2020. Today, I am on day 3. I put the bracelet on July 7th. I'm on day 3. I made it all the way for 4 days once, but then I realized I had to get out of bed. I did have to move about in the world, and I had to people. so that, no, I'm kidding. I did make it to 4 days. And actually, truly, it was the temperature. It was last Thursday that it is. You'll find out what your kryptonite is, right? There was one day when we first started in July, we had a big event at our church that I had coordinated, and it was a parking lot dance party. One of the members of our center has he's the drummer in a fantastic girl cover band called Glory. So they do all these songs from the 80s, a lot of Blondie, and just great, great music. So he got his band to come after our second service, and we set up a big parking lot party. And then we hired the taco lady. That's honestly her name. She doesn't have a taco truck, but she comes in her van, so to speak, and she unloads like a grill and everything, and a big buffet, makes all the fixins. And the taco truck was no host, but it was like $13 for an all-you-can-eat taco buffet. You could just keep going back, and I think it was $7 for kids or something. And I just left that up to my team. But then my team came up to me, right? So service is letting out. Everybody's hungry because you can smell tacos. They've been cooking for 30 minutes. And one of my team members come up to me and says, the taco lady didn't bring change. I actually took my bracelet off and threw it on the ground. I did, in front of everybody. I took it off, I threw it on the ground, and I went like that. I didn't know it was a Sunday afternoon at 12:30. I had no accountant there. She's not there on a Sunday. And I just kind of stared at her, and I went, no sé. No idea. No, and you know what? It all worked out. It totally worked out because there were people who, they didn't want change. So they just gave her 20 and said, keep it. She took checks, which I thought was lovely, so people could write a check for their lunch. But a lot of people don't carry checks anymore, but it all worked out. But it's not as easy as it sounds, right? It really isn't that easy. And here's a warning label that we'll put in the book. He said, sadly, you may actually lose friends. Isn't that interesting? You may recognize that relationships with some people that you consider to be good friends really center on expressing dissatisfaction about whatever it is you talk about. That may be your commonality, dissatisfaction. You may get together and complain about the weather. You may get together and complain about politics. You may get together and complain about, fill in the blank. This person, that person, your ex, or whatever. And at first you may feel guilty, but then you may also notice that your bracelet is staying put, right? That you're not having to switch it constantly. And the other, here's a wonderful side effect. You may actually start feeling happier. Complaining really should happen infrequently. Criticism and gossip, really, that's kind of a never. There's really not a good time for that. So there's a couple of questions as you're going through this. Your mission, should you choose to accept it. If you complain, is the cause severe? Are you complaining frequently? In the summer, that can become a habit for me. Has it been a month or more since you complained? That's a really good sign, right? Wow, I made it my 21 days. If you're complaining more than once a month, you might just be giving into the habit of griping. It might just be a habit now. And most habits can be changed, right? How many of you have ever changed a habit? Any former smokers in the room? Right? The other thing that you may have to own up to is that you may be an ouch looking for a trigger or a hurt. Poor health is one of the most common complaints people voice, but a lack of complaining can actually have a positive impact on your wellness. When you stop complaining, it can have a positive impact on your wellness. Will Bowen tells 2 stories in the book. He got a call to go to the hospital to visit a woman who had had a stroke. And when I think her name was Betty, and when he walked into the room, he said, "Betty, how are you?" And she said, "Well, Reverend, I'm dying. So we need to talk. I need to tell you my desires and how I want you to handle things at my funeral service and whatnot." And then the nurse came in and said, "Oh, you must be her minister." And he said, "Yes." He said, I'm here to, provide what comfort I can." He said, I'm so sorry to hear the news that Betty's passing is imminent. And the nurse looked at me, she said, "No, it's not. She had a stroke, yes, but it was not a severe stroke. It was rather mild. She will have some rehabilitation, but we're lining up a rehab center that she'll go through from here so that they can help her with, there might be just like a word or something that she misses every now and then, but they'll make sure that she hasn't lost her power of speech altogether and help with, control of her hand and stuff, but she'll be fine. We expect that she'll be in the rehab center maybe 6 weeks, 8 at tops. And Will said, "Betty, I just spoke with your nurse, and they said that you're going to be fine." She went, No, I'm dying." She said, "I need you to really meet with me and help me get things arranged and whatnot." And he just kind of shook his head. He said, "Betty, really?" He said, I really believe you're going to be fine. All of the medical personnel, everybody thinks you're going to be fine." And she went, "Well, that's what they say, but I'm dying." 2 weeks later, he officiated her memorial. Within 2 weeks, she passed away from a mild stroke. And he goes on to talk about how, have you ever noticed, people who complain about their health invariably have more to complain about. Doctors estimate that 67% of illnesses result from thinking sick. 67%, because people think sick. The other side of the coin, one of my favorite stories was about Hal. Hal was in his 30s when he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. It was 1999, and Hal was 39 years old, and he was a good friend of Will Bowen's. The doctors estimated that he would die in less than 6 months. In addition to this terrible, dire diagnosis, Hal was also facing other challenges. He had made his living selling health insurance, but yet he had none. His bills piled up, and it was a constant struggle just to keep the lights on and to keep his family fed. And when Will Bowen found out he was dying, he visited Hal and was astounded by his upbeat attitude. He didn't complain, but he talked about how great his life had been and how fortunate he was. Through it all, Hal kept his great sense of humor, and one day, Will invited him to go for a walk, but because he was so weak, they never made it past the front yard. So they stood in front of his home enjoying the fresh air, and they talked, and as they did, Hal noticed several large buzzards making slow, lazy circles directly over where he stood. Hal looked up and pointed at them and said, "Ooh, a bad sign." And when I saw the devilish glint in his eyes, Will said, I exploded into laughter. And when the laughter subsided, I asked, "How do you manage not to complain with all you're going through?" And Hal leaned on his cane and said, "Easy. It's not the 15th. And feeling that he'd adequately answered my question, Hal began to walk back into the house. And I said, "Wait, what the heck does the 15th have to do with anything?" And Hal said, "When I was diagnosed, I knew it was going to be tough, and that I could go through it cursing God, cursing science or everyone else, or I could focus on the good things in my life. So I decided to give myself one unhappy day each month to complain. And I randomly picked the 15th. So whenever anything happens that I might want to complain about, I tell myself that I have to wait until the 15th. And Will said to him, "Does that work?" And Hal said, "Pretty well." And then Will asked again, "But don't you get really down on the 15th of every month? That must be a terrible day." And Hal looked at me and said, "No, actually, by the time the 15th gets here, I've forgotten what it was I was going to complain about." Two very different stories, Betty and Hal. The week before last, Max and I had the opportunity. Let me back up a second. What I'm beginning to notice, and yes, I am only on day 4, and I've been trying this since July 7th, but I am noticing how I really consider my thoughts. I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. That means that a filter was never installed. It's kind of a good news, other news thing. The good news is you will never have to guess what I'm feeling or thinking. Stop nodding, Max. The other news is that if it's on my mind, it's on my lips. Donning this bracelet has actually created that filter for me. I really do find myself taking that pause before I speak. And that really, I know that may sound so simple, but truly that is such new behavior for me. It really is new behavior. I also grew up in a household where sarcasm was an art form. You know, some people took up painting or drawing. No, we took up sarcasm. And we were praised for it. It was like, whoa, good one. The week before last, Max and I traveled to Chapala, Mexico, so that this is the 3rd year in a row for me, Max's 2nd year in a row, and we attended the Conference of the Latin Americas. It is where all of the centers for spiritual living from all the Latin American countries gather for their conference. I highly recommend it if you ever get a chance to go. It's typically every August, and there are practitioners and ministers there from Peru and from, of course, from other different states in Mexico and Chile and Venezuela, I think Colombia, Guatemala. I speak 2 languages, English and Brooklyn, and I speak a very unique form of Spanglish, but I try really hard. And I noticed, I think because of the bracelet and because of the commitment, I noticed, well, no, I don't think that's it. I think it's the culture. I think the Latin American culture is the most beautiful culture of hospitality. I have never, in my years in Science of Mind, going to a Livermore, going to annual gatherings, I've never been surrounded by a group of people who are so sincerely and deeply grateful that you are there. That's the only way I can explain it. They are so happy and grateful that you traveled to Mexico to be part of their conference. It's one of the holiest weeks. The hotel that they chose, that they choose every year, it's the Hotel Villa Monte Carlo, and maybe 3 stars, maybe. It's the kind of hotel where if, let's just say they don't have a pillow menu. They don't have air conditioning, but they do have a fan by the window. Sometimes it rotates, sometimes it doesn't. They don't have faucets in the shower. They have one knob that you turn on, and they sit on a thermal bed. Is that what it's called? A thermal something or other? Yeah, it's kind of a volcano. So the water is naturally heated. Maybe. Maybe not. So when you turn on the shower, basically it's like vegetables without labels, right? Could be cream corn, could be peaches. You don't know. When you turn on the shower, maybe it's going to be warm that day. Maybe it's going to be a cold shower. Who knows? Who knows? And if you go to ask for an extra pillow, they just very nicely say, "I'm so sorry, we're sold out because of the conference." So no, there's no extra pillows. There's 2 per room. That's it. You know what? I didn't complain once. Not once. Because what I noticed was the way they go out of their way to make sure you are so well cared for. Every server at the hotel, because your meals are all included, right? And you sit in this beautiful, it's a canopy outdoors with a beautiful view of the lake. Mariachi's playing. Who cares? So okay, I got 1 pillow. Suck it up, Susan. Deal with it. If you go to pour a cup of coffee, there's one of the servers is there immediately wanting to take your coffee and walk you back to the table with it. They anticipate your needs before you even ask for it. If you go up to get some fruit or yogurt, they're handing you a spoon. So you know what? They're not 3 or 4 stars or 5 stars, but good Lord, they are 5-star hospitality. And I noticed that the bracelet, what I do believe is that the bracelet heightened my awareness of that, right? Heightened my awareness of finding the good and looking for the good. I was really so impressed with all of it. So I'm going to begin to wrap up. And I'd like to ask, a couple of things. M.H. Alderson once wrote, "If at first you don't succeed, you're running about average." So I'm okay with being on day 3. Will Bowen says that if you're complaining, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be. Because what happens is now you're becoming aware of it. I am acutely aware of when a complaint comes out of my mouth. And then I can begin to erase it. I move my bracelet, and then I complain real fast again and move it again, because that's I can't wear it on the left arm. So I want to ask you, who would like to take up the challenge? Because I brought a bunch of bracelets from San Jose, and Max is going to help me hand them out. Whoa, can I get somebody to help Max hand them out? Thank you so much. And you may want to wait. You may want to say, "I'll start tomorrow," because I have a phone call that I have to make. But when you put the bracelet on, it basically starts now. That's right. You know what? That's the cartoon in the book. Did you hear what he said? He said it's the wrong color. The very first page of the book, because if you order the bracelets from a complaintfreeworld.org, they're purple. And the very first page in the book is people lining up to get their bracelet, and the caption says, "Purple, I hate purple." So here's what you're going to notice probably by next week. By next week, you'll probably have gotten glimpses into if and when, how you complain, what your kryptonite is, right? Mine is weather all the time. Weather and probably a degree of what we might refer to as incompetence in the customer service arena. I'm putting that tactfully. Oh, how many people their kryptonite is driving, other drivers? Yeah. Yeah, don't switch it while you're driving. But as soon as you get home, it's like, all right, I got to move that. But it's kind of fun because you're also reading. Can somebody tell me the title of the book again? I don't want to get it wrong. About blessings? No, the one about blessings. The Gentle Art of Blessing. So this is what somebody noticed, and we're not reading that book. I ordered it, got it yesterday because I want to consider it for 2020 because we're putting together our year already. Somebody said that they've noticed now when they're driving, instead of an unfriendly gesture or word, they're just blessing people. They're just saying, "Bless you on your travels. Get there safely. I hope you're not off to an emergency. Thank you for letting me practice my practice." So you're going to notice that probably by after about a week, if not sooner, right? But that's a good news, right? Because you will have become conscious of your incompetence, right? We're starting off with unconscious incompetence. And then you'll be noticing when you complain. And then you'll be ready for phase 2, right? Conscious incompetence. So if you get a chance to stay for the workshop this afternoon, I will talk about the 3 different phases and what you'll notice in each one. I'll probably give you more stories from the book. And we'll talk about loopholes. Because you're all going to want to find a loophole, right? I used to say, well, wait a minute. If I had to switch my bracelet in today's day 1, then I can just complain all day, right? Because I'm still on day 1. There's a great quote that talks about an egg. And it's an anonymous quote, but it says, "If an egg is broken by an outside force, a life ends. But if an egg is broken from within, a life begins." All change begins from within, as does all growth. Thank you for letting me be with you today. Let's pray. There is only one power, one source. It has many names, but it also has no name. Because no matter what name it is given, language would be woefully inadequate to try to sum up this presence, this power. Spirit, God, Gaia, Buddha, Jesus, Lord, all the names we give it, and it is still that presence, a presence for good, a power for good in the universe, a power for beauty in the universe, a presence of life and love and wisdom and grace, perfection perfection and wholeness. The beginning, the end, the Alpha, the Omega, and everything in between. It is in the words of this prayer, and it is in this space between the words, the notes of the music. It just flows, flows, and flows in, through, and as each and every being. And I am one with it. It can use me, and I can use it. It is connected. It is a golden thread that connects each and every individual. So all of the things God is, I am. But the truth is, all of the things God is, so is every one of us. You are here by divine purpose, by divine appointment. You have incarnated uniquely as you to do what can only be done by you. And so that I know that your life has purpose and meaning. I know that you too are a force for good, or you wouldn't be here, quite frankly. You have come together in this place, this center for spiritual living, so that you can create within yourself a center for spiritual living. And you can do so with ease and grace. And you can do so with perfection and joy. And all we need to do every single day is take that deep breath, or every single minute, that quick, take that deep breath and go within to that place inside you that is a clear, beautiful, blank canvas. And to choose every day that which makes your life full. And today I choose love, and today I choose grace. Today I choose wisdom to know when to speak and when not to speak. Today I choose to contribute to a complaint-free world. And with this prayer, I invite all of you to do the same. We sometimes live in a world that can appear weary, but what you bring to it is greatly needed. A blessing, a smile, a word of kindness. It can be that simple. And so I am filled with gratitude. I'm filled with gratitude for Reverend Harriet, for the Lighthouse Center for Spiritual Living in Livermore, for CSL San Jose, for the Global Vision, and for all of the centers around the world who are taking a stand for something and against nothing. This is how we change the world, one person at a time, one prayer at a time. And I call that very good. And I release my word into the action of the law, that benign universe that was part of our reading today. And I invite you, if anything you heard today rings true for you, to simply anchor this prayer with me by saying, and so it is.
And so it is. Amen.
Thank you.
And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. Amen. 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 And so it is. Amen.